Hello, everybody. Welcome to the CoLab, SpacetoCo's free monthly online sessions designed to assist those working in community venues to learn, upskill, and be inspired to do their work more effectively and efficiently. We hope you find these sessions useful for the important work you do in our local communities. For those of you who are watching this recording after this live event, hello, and we hope you get valuable knowledge from this session. My name is Carmela, and I organize these monthly learning series. Just a bit about SpacetoCo before we move on. Our mission in SpacetoCo is to help community venues be a thriving hub in their communities. We do so by providing opportunities to be able to grow bookings, increase community engagement, as well as support. We also create and provide free resources for those working in community venues. SpacetoCo is a two-sided marketplace where you can list your spaces where guests can find and book them online. It is also an efficient booking system tool where you can reduce your admin by 80%. We work with a number of local governments as well as community centers across Australia and New Zealand. So today's session is how your community venue can prepare and respond to emergencies. So we will learn how community venues can better prepare for and respond to emergencies, and we will explore top hazards, practical steps for personal and organizational readiness, and the critical role that venues and their managers can play in a community response. We will learn how your space might be used differently in a crisis, how to support stakeholders under stress, and why emergency preparedness is a shared responsibility and not just for experts. This is a timely conversation about expecting the unexpected and strengthening our collective resilience. And to introduce who our speaker is for today, we have the awesome Greg Morgan. Greg is the Principal Business and Resilience at Auckland Emergency Management, focusing on emergency readiness for small to medium businesses and Auckland's most impacted communities. With a background as Head of Response and Recovery for the region, Greg brings experience across inclusive service design, community development, and strategic leadership. His career spans libraries, the disability sectors, and church ministry, reflecting a deep commitment to serving a diverse community.
Thank you so much. And so this is a pretty typical example of what can happen when the unexpected strikes. So that's what I want to talk about today. And thank you for the introductions in the chat. I can see the spread of people and where you're from, and I really appreciate being able to see names and places. This talk is quite generic. It's not specifically around Auckland. It's some pointers that people can think about in the community space in terms of supporting communities around emergencies. And I'm sorry that you're going to have to put up with my little prompts to move through the slides. So, of course, I work in Auckland, which has a population of nearly 1.8 million people. And next slide, please, Kamala. And the topics today that I want to cover, I just want to give a wee bit of an intro, but then talk about whole of society thinking, your facility planning, business continuity, and some opportunities, and then leave a little bit of time for discussion as well. Next slide, please. And keep pressing them through. These will pop up. I was going to do this, of course. So increasingly in civil defence emergency management, there's a commitment to a whole of society view of emergency management. The group I work for is the Civil Defence and Emergency Management Group in Auckland. And so Auckland Emergency Management is a council department in Auckland Council. We're the department that has responsibility for liaising with other partners and agencies around emergency management. We're the office for the Auckland Civil Defence Emergency Management Group. There are 16 of these regional groups across New Zealand. In most places, smaller councils have their own emergency management teams, and then a regional group coordinates overall for really big events. Auckland is an unusual council in that we're unitary, so there's just one council. And so we are the group for the Auckland region. We don't have smaller emergency management teams under us. So our role is, that lead coordination role for certain kinds of emergencies, supporting with others. And we also support 3 New Zealand response teams. So we have over 100 volunteers who are boots on the ground in activities such as urban search and rescue, rescuing people from swift running waters, that kind of practical stuff. These are volunteer people we support and resource and train, and they are accredited to help out in emergencies. So that's a little bit of the background. And within this context, that communities are at the heart of disaster resilience and effective emergency management. So the unit that I particularly work in is the community planning unit, and we do a lot around community readiness. And so we are thinking all the time about communities and networks across a diverse city, which is urban and rural, and how these groups work together to plan for the unexpected and then to act together when something happens which has that label of an emergency. And I quite often quote a colleague in Wellington. So Wellington, New Zealand's capital city, the southernmost capital in the world. If you want a pub quiz fact, everyone is an emergency manager, says Dan Neely. And that is absolutely the truth. So although there are people in roles like mine, we are emergency management professionals, actually, for all time, humans have been coping with emergencies and unexpected things. So, we all bring that expertise into times of particular stress and strain. Thank you. Next slide. And probably just keep pressing again as well. So we would know that a response will often involve an official emergency response. So in Australia, that will often be a state coordinated response. In New Zealand, it might be coordinated by one of the groups, and it will be prioritised. So it will involve rescues and messaging and shelter and needs assessment. By shelter, of course, not necessarily people sleeping in a place, but having somewhere safe to go whilst their needs are assessed and they can ask for further assistance. And then alongside the official response is the community-led activity, which is local, fast to stand up, people looking after each other, collecting and passing on information. I remember seeing some years ago a video that was made after the earthquakes in Christchurch in New Zealand's South Island, and a person who said, "I didn't know my neighbours before the earthquake struck. I know my neighbours now." Because often the people who come to support us at a time of need, of course, will just be the people around us. They won't be a professional. They'll just be someone who is nearby. And emergency groups in Australia and New Zealand do put a lot of emphasis on getting to know your neighbours and the people around you who could be your supports or whom you might be able to support if the unexpected happens and suddenly you need to rely on other people. This can be quite tricky. Sometimes people say, "But I don't even like my neighbours." Well, they might still be the people who will come to your assistance, and maybe they're still people that you can assist. So, we have some quite fun conversations around the reality of that. The truth is, we're all connected and the connections are valuable to us. Thanks. The next slide. And what are the benefits of a community? Well, if you think about a community-led response, so people helping each other, and they're doing that fast, they have the benefits of local knowledge and collective action, being able to work together for mutual support, and particularly around needs and offers. So needs and offers is the business of matching up the expertise in a local community and the need for that expertise. So if somebody is able to get hold of some shovels and clear a drain, for instance, and then somebody who is unable to clear their own drains makes it known that they just need their property cleared, the person with the shovels, the people with the shovels can get together and come and assist. And, there are so many strong stories from all sorts of emergencies where people have just lent in and helped. Needs and offers is a really important part of a local response to help a community utilise its resources and maintain a sense of agency for itself. So those are some of the benefits. Thanks. And the next slide, Kamala. So now let's think about your facility and your planning, and we'll go on to the next slide because we'll just see here that, of course, you do some planning. You understand your obligations around health and safety. You understand what to do if there's an emergency situation and an evacuation, and you no doubt have some kind of plan for that. And your plan would be catering for the diverse circumstances of the people who use your building in terms of mobility and their ability to leave that building independently, or whether they need some support. Your kind of plan would take that into account. And you certainly would be understanding the local hazards. So if your community facility is in a place that's prone to flooding, you will understand that and it will be in your plan. You'll have thought about what happens if there are floodwaters around the base of our building. How do we get people out? Which is the best door to use? And we think about these things all the time, of course, in evacuation when there's a fire. We think about the fire exits and leave them unblocked. So we all, when we're responsible for facilities, we all have a plan like that. And here's an opportunity now to think about building onto that plan around business continuity. Next slide, please. So when something happens, we might want to think, okay, how do we keep operating? And it will help us plan for business continuity, and there are many guides online to assist you with this, if we think about what's our core purpose, because business continuity will be the stronger if we really focus on our core purpose and our core activities. We don't want to be distracted by doing something which isn't really what our service is about, but it's a kind of an add-on. It's a nice to have. We want to really think about the core activities, what we do in terms of serving the community, and the vital tasks that are required so that we can deliver on those activities. What are the supplies that are needed? Who are the people who are needed? And if the emergency is such that it's not safe for us to continue our work at this time, or the community is distracted, and needs to be somewhere else to be safe, then as soon as it's safe to do so, how do we reopen and pick up our business? It's a good idea to think through who are our key stakeholders and customers, and to have a sense of business continuity. What would resuming our normal operation look like? Remembering that in the community space with community facilities, it can help send a message to a community that it is coming out of the stressful time if the normal resumes, if it's safe to do so. So you could create an operational plan B around business continuity. And there are some more pointers as well. The next slide, please. The next slide shows some more pointers to think about. What about relocation? So if your activity is about running some programs and you have a kind of niche program offer that nobody else can provide, and you've got the people who can continue to run those programs, but you can't use your own facility, where could you go to do that? Maybe some of what you do, you could do online. Perhaps you have network meetings. And if you host network meetings and you can't, because of the emergency, do those in place, but as you're through the first hours of the emergency and things are starting to get back to a bit of a familiar pattern, maybe you could hop online and host a network meeting. And I'm sure that people are starting to think of all of those lessons from COVID times and how we pivoted. Do you remember the word pivot? I don't even care to say the word anymore, but it is about pivoting. It is quite important when you're doing your business continuity planning to think about finances and sign-offs. So if because of the emergency somebody can't get to a place or they can't get to an online system, that is something that I connect with today, having had all of these issues getting online. Who else could sign off on the money? Who could approve payments? Who will pay you? That's something to think about ahead of time and make sure that you have the provision in place so that somebody can make the finances work. Think about your level of insurance, the kind of insurance that you have, and whether it is fit for purpose when an emergency happens. And of course, backing up records and saving and sharing plans. It's a really good idea when you're doing business continuity planning to have a process that involves as many people as possible. So if you have a staff member or you have a couple of lead volunteers who are really part of your operation, involving those people in the business continuity planning will bring diverse perspectives to the table in terms of what the priorities are and who could do what to keep things going or to start them up again when it's safe to do so. So business continuity planning is valuable to do. We do the compliance stuff very readily. The business continuity planning feels like a bit of a nice to have, but is actually pretty essential to your core purpose. Next slide, please. And so here are some opportunities, because in fact, an emergency can present opportunities. And you've probably been in this position already when disaster has struck and people have had good ideas about what your community facility could be doing. And maybe it is a chance to deliver on your key purpose in new ways. And you might even get to tell a great story about that afterwards. Now, I think that you've got a pretty big decision point early on. Do something yourself, use the facility that you have, or support something local. If there's some initiative which is quite strong locally and it's well set up, it's well organized, what that initiative would require is some extra human resource, some extra kind of person power. Maybe supporting that endeavor is better than doing something yourself. Or perhaps your community facility is uniquely placed where it is, and you would be the natural beacon, the kind of focal point for the local community to come to somewhere safe. I can't answer that for you. You think about it yourself. Is it best to do something with others, or is it a good idea to set something up yourself? And what might you do? Well, one of the important functions you could fulfill in an emergency through your networks is sharing timely information, getting reliable information that's sort of date and time stamped so that you know it's current, and sharing it to your networks. Maybe you could enable someone else's business continuity. Maybe there's a service, a public service, could even be a business that needs to relocate, and you could provide some space for that. So you're enabling someone else's business continuity, and that business continuity benefits the community around you. As I said before, sharing contact information and needs in office is really valuable. And on the ground in a local community, quite often there's a kind of natural vetting that happens because people are known. So you know whether the office are coming from a reliable person, you know whether the person with the needs is kind of where they are. You can see the damage to their property. You can think about whether it's safe for somebody to go and assist them. Quite a lot of that kind of local area knowledge and view will be valuable in matching up needs and offers. And you might think about making space available, because community facilities have got that wonderful asset, which is space. Next slide, please. So you could be a place for locals to gather during an emergency. Now, when an emergency happens, people will start having all sorts of good ideas. So if you can do some planning in advance and have a bit of a think about what you might do during an emergency, it will help you stay grounded in uncertain times. Good idea to talk and to plan and to share and to test some assumptions. So people assume that you could do full level catering to feed people if there was an emergency. What kind of power supply do you have? What would happen if the power was out for an extended period? Would you be able to do that? Testing some of these assumptions ahead of time, you'll find quite reassuring, I think, once you get into it. What would you intend to offer? Would you intend to offer space only, or would you offer something else? Would you offer equipment? What would that equipment be? Would you offer some supplies? Would you have them in stock in advance, because during an emergency you might not be able to get them? Would you give people a cup of tea? Would you give them something more? If you can think through the dimensions of what you might be doing, you will know what other governance or management sign-offs that you require to be able to do that. Who will hold the authority on the day for you to stand up and do something? If you decide that in advance, it will help you to move ahead without undue delay and lots of arguments on the day. So thinking about that in advance, what some potential scenarios could be. Don't overcomplicate it. Keep them quite simple, but just know the dimensions of what might be the support you would be offering the local community. Thanks. Kamala. Will you host this yourself? Will you and your team or your volunteers around you, will you be the people who are running this activity for the community? Or will you play host to another group? Is there a volunteer group that wants to stand up during an emergency? In some parts of New Zealand, we use the term community emergency hubs. Does a community-led initiative need some space? Might it need some space? Perhaps there's a group that's got the use of a building, and the building would be fine to use in many kinds of emergencies, but wouldn't be any good if the power was out, or if it was a flood type emergency. Or perhaps they intend to stand up, but the building is damaged and they assess it as not fit to use and they're looking for something else. Would your space be available for that? And so what would be the understanding that you would have with a group? A group that you had an arrangement with ahead of an emergency, or when something happened and they approached you with a question, could you help us? Could you give us some space? What would you think about in terms of standing something up and setting something up? What parts of the facility would they use? What parts of your facility would you not let them use? Which parts of your facility might pose some safety and access risks, something that you felt would make it unsuitable for use by people unfamiliar with the building? Who would supervise the building? You're thinking about health and safety and security. Has the group thought about those sorts of issues? Can you see that they've planned for them? What would the operating information be? Are there time locks that are automated and might shut people out of a building at an unhelpful moment? And scale up and scale down. What will happen if things go on for longer than you might anticipate, or if a group wants to do more, if perhaps they've thought that people will come in and have a cup of tea, sort themselves out and go somewhere else, but then some people have to sleep in the facility. Is that acceptable or not acceptable? What are the parameters? Next slide, please. And it's important, of course, if you're going to flip your business in any way, and business can be a community operation too, that you keep your stakeholders informed, so that if you've got a facility that's open for the community as a whole, that your regular stakeholders sent a message and they know that the place is being otherwise used. And you might think about how you would do that during an emergency. You might think about how you would do it if the power was off, if you had limited access to communications. Certainly access arrangements are really important. Where's the key? Who has the backup? Is it automated? What happens when the automated systems don't function? Is the key under a flower pot? Well, probably won't be under a flower pot, but it could be somewhere that only a couple of people know how to access, and another couple of people know how to access. They're trusted to know, so that in an emergency, the agreed use of the space can be achieved quite fast. What are the expectations? And then if you're running the thing yourself, it might be good to think about the potential relationships with civil defence or emergency management, the official response, to enable coordination and minimize confusion. Perhaps you would be telling the official response that you're standing up to do something for the community. So in the work we do with community organizations, community emergency hubs aren't tasked by us. We don't require them to stand up, but we would like to know that they've stood up, so that we can add that to our information sources going out to the community as to where they might receive assistance, a place to go, just to be quiet, have a cup of tea, calm down, maybe take a pet with them, all of those things. It's good to be able to share that information. So what's your relationship going to be with an official response, do you think? You won't know absolutely every circumstance, but you'll be able to think of some, I'm sure. And that might lead you to learn a little bit about how emergencies are coordinated in your area, getting advice from your local emergency management teams, and of course, having your own personal and family plan. A lot of this comes back to the fact that we all have to take responsibility for our own planning within our families and within our networks. And so having our own plan is important. And, there are some principles to think about, making sure that we're safe and that our families are safe first, before we go off to help others. Maybe our job is to be at the end of a telephone and give someone some advice rather than go out into the field. Yeah, thank you. Next slide. And here's just some examples of things that I thought about that might be useful prompts for you. This comes out of our thinking about community emergency hubs and how to support them. Maybe a community emergency hub that you're involved in is simply a safe place, a place to share information and updates and provides a link to needs and offers. So you might put up a bulletin board, you might have networks, you might have access to email and be sending information out and about. Who will do what is quite a good thing to think about, and who will lead what is done. So if you're going to host people in a space, it's quite a good idea to think of, okay, here are the 2 or 3 people who could be the leaders of that activity, and they will decide how many volunteers are required to help on the day, and they will say, yep, you're a volunteer and you're going to be on and help us for the next couple of hours. The supervisor, if you want to use that language, the person who's overseeing the lot, needs to think about people and their safety and the fact that in an emergency, some people will try to do too much. So you get a volunteer to help. It's neat to be able to welcome them, stand them up, make sure they feel confident in what they're doing, but also to help them stand down and hand over to someone else. And I'm certain that your local emergency management team will have some advice that you could use on how you can work with people in that volunteer space. It's really the essence of good volunteer management, clarity of roles, respecting people, but making sure that they observe safety as well. So there's a few pointers there. Thank you. Next slide. And on into local leadership, maybe in the area you're in, we'll go to the next slide, you could use your service, your facility, your fantastic reputation to kick off some community discussions. And some community discussions, people often turn up and they want to talk about some quite grim scenario and everything that will happen. And they want to get right into the nuts and bolts with certainty as to how a particular scenario will unfold. I think a really good way to start a conversation about this kind of community-focused planning is to get together first and think, what are some of the positives about your location? Just in life, just what are some of the things you like about where you are, where your facility is, about the people who live around about and the pattern of the lives lived there. If you can get people thinking about what they like in the neighborhood, it just takes some of the tension away and gets people to connect with the values in the local community. What makes your community strong already? And so therefore, what resources are in your community? And there might be local tradespeople, there might be people with a skill, there might be a business that has certain kinds of supplies, and it would be really great if you were thinking about a local business being able to stay open, what their business continuity would look like, how they would do some of that continuity planning. And then you might think, gosh, it would be really great if they were part of the mix, so that if something were happening and we could help them stay open, how could we do that? So involving kind of local business people in the discussion might be worth doing as well. Finding out about local hazards is really important. And there are lots of tools that civil defence emergency management teams and their councils and their authorities, their state governments produce to help you understand the hazards in a local area. Really good for you to find out about them, because your facility will probably be useful in some kinds of emergencies, but not others. And then thinking about who can help you respond to vulnerabilities. How would they do that? Are they up for it? And, what are the networks you could start this conversation with? And you could facilitate it, not over-promising, saying, we're just starting this conversation and then let's pass to someone else to do the next stage. Or you might think that actually you could give a leadership a kind of energy right through some very local planning and into a response if it were needed. And I think we might just about be at the end of my slides. What does the next one say? There we go. There's a curtain. So the curtain will part slowly. Perhaps the curtain has stuck. Just summing up, understand your local hazards and risks, make plans for yourself and your household, your whānau, that's family, friends at work. Keep emergency supplies on hand. They don't have to be fancy. They just have to be kind of goodish things. Some people will be thinking about generators or Starlink. You need to think about how they would work, who would pay for the operating costs and the maintenance and so on. Think about where to go if you had to leave home, and plan at work. Where would you go if you had to leave work quite suddenly? Thinking about those community resources and networks and sharing plans and with others is really important. The format of the planning doesn't matter nearly so much as having the discussions and doing the planning through conversation. And I think the next slide has my contact details. Oh, discussion or questions. Business continuity planning guide there. If you just go on to the next slide, please, Kamala, it will give people my email, and aem.govt.nz is the website for Auckland Emergency Management where I work. But you could use lots of resources in the emergency management space that would help you with some of these topics that I've touched on today. So apologies again for the rocky start, but here we go. We have a little bit of time left for some comment and discussion. I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Greg. Honestly, I took so much from your session. Just wanted to share some of the notes I did take. One of them was, we're all emergency managers, even personally and in our family planning. And I really loved what you said about often people coming to support us aren't the professionals, but those nearest to us, our neighbors, even if we may not know or like them. But we are all connected, and connections are valuable to us. And I love that you said that community response is organic and it doesn't need to be complicated. You just need to keep it simple. So thank you so much for that awesome session. I'm sure other people have found that really interesting as well. And to get everybody's thinking about their own emergency procedures in their own community venues. So if the audience has any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat. I do have a few here that I've noted while people are probably typing in their questions. One of them is, I said, do you have any real examples of a community venue that have successfully put an emergency management procedure in place and how it impacted their community?
There are, in the case of Auckland, there are some quite well-developed community organisations that have really worked together as networks. So they've done some quite significant support activity previously where there have been some serious floods. And so they are building and building and building on that work. So they have thought about some equipment that I'm always a bit cautious about kind of listing off equipment, because people hear that and think that's what we have to have. They've made some applications to external funding bodies, this organisation, and they have sourced various pieces of equipment so that they can keep going, they can cook, they can keep power going through a generator and so on for quite an extended period. And they've just built and built and built on what was an initial response of really just helping people to get to a dry place to be safe. And I haven't named them, but I've got them in my head and I can see them. And, they spoke recently at a community forum that we ran, and they gave some examples of how they're sharing expertise and reaching out in their networks. So there are quite a few examples of that. Other groups are in a very early planning stage.
Oh, Greg. Oh no, we've lost Greg. Greg! Sorry about that, team. I think Greg's connection may have just dropped, but that might also be the council system again. I don't know if he might jump back in. We might. Oh, there. Oh, Greg, we
Yeah, we're
lost
back.
you for a hot second.
Oh, we're back. I was just saying, yes, there are some groups that I know that have worked in the flood support space, and they are really ramping up what they do, and they are seeking some more equipment, and they're buying some bedding and so on. Not every group will want to do that, and you have to think through the safety aspects of people staying in a place for extended periods.
Mm,
Mm.
awesome. I think your connection, I don't know whether it's mine or yours, but the connection kind of
It'll
cut
be
for.
it's our connection, I think, as they're trying to
Yeah,
build it
that's
back.
okay. Oh, I think his connection. Um, we just have one more question before we move. We just wrap up the
Mhm.
session. But I did have here. What are often barriers community venues have that don't allow them to utilize their spaces during emergencies?
Uh, I think that some of the barriers are people's different expectations. So expectations that are a bit unrealistic would be one thing. And so if you are quite ambitious about what you might do, but you don't really have the kind of facility that would allow that, then that's something. In some communities, you might want to think about the cultural aspects of your facility. I didn't
Mm,
go into this in the presentation,
yeah.
but thinking about some communities and the perception of the community around, for example, men and women in the same space and just how things might be. You might want to think about the diversity of your community and what some of those perceptions are. I think perceptions are quite a big barrier. People
Mm,
sometimes think that if they go to a certain place, so let's just say if they go to a church, that the church will be in its regular church mode, not in its community space mode. And so if
mm,
that church has been a place experience or something support. So some of those perception barriers are quite important, and that's where the community networking and having a kind of diverse types of people in the mix and conversing and saying, gosh, in an emergency, this would be a safe place to go. That's
yeah.
really quite important. And the health and safety stuff is kind of obvious, thinking about children in the space, thinking about kitchens. Can the kitchen be locked off so you don't want kids running around the kitchen and so on? I say that's a consideration. It's important, although I think most community facilities are on top of those things and they have to
Mm,
think about their normal health and safety rules and make sure that they would apply even when the unexpected happens, that you don't just don't throw all the regular compliance stuff out the window. So I'm not sure those are the massive barriers, but I think the
mm.
perception ones can be.
Yeah, that's
And
actually so good.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Mm,
That's a great way to think about it. Like for we often forget about the cultural aspects of like even in case of emergencies, different cultures or
yeah.
yeah, communities might have different ways of going about like how they do things or what they're comfortable with. So that's so good
Yes, and
to
yeah, and people have seen movies. People have seen
mm,
movies, and they've seen little tents over beds, and they've seen lots of stretchers and so forth. It might be quite a good conversation to have that what your community facility is doing is just providing a space for people to be for a couple of hours before they can decide what to do next. So they
mm,
can come and charge their phones and then jack up with a family or friend, family members or a friend, where to go to be next and maybe where they'll go and sleep that night, that it won't be in that facility. So kind of bringing people's the
yeah.
headspace down to what's realistic and supportive
Mhm.
on the day. That would be good work to do. Yeah.
Yeah, as you did say, it's the perception. And then I think reiterating what you said, that it doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs to be simple sometimes, even just hosting a cup of tea for people who want to just like visit. So that's so
Yeah.
good.
And if you can do some of the planning in advance, folks, it will help you when people have lots of good ideas. And, lots of the good ideas are going to be great ideas and you're going to be able to do them. If you've got a
Yeah.
little bit of a plan and you can say, well, we meant to do this, but it would be easy to add that on, then that's a very different conversation from somebody turning up with an idea and you've never had a plan, you don't even
Mm,
know whether you can open it. So if you can do a bit of planning, then you know what you can adapt. If you haven't got a plan, then everything sounds enormous in terms of being an ask. So a little bit of planning is a good idea. Yeah.
That's so true. Speaking of planning for our community venues watching and are probably going to be watching after the session, Greg will be sharing his PowerPoint and probably any other resources that he's mentioned. Whether you're looking at updating your procedures, I'm sure that he will have links for certain checklists
I
or
will.
even
I
basic
will.
things. Yeah, in the
Yeah,
PowerPoint.
I'm happy. I'm happy to get emails from people if you just want to email me. And I was mindful that this audience was going to be really diverse. It's also very patient putting up with all the floundering around at the beginning. So thank you. But I didn't put lots of links in, but I'm happy to take emails from people. So just drop me a line.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, for those of you who are asking as well, we will be sharing again Greg's email, the resources, the recording of this webinar, as well as Greg's contact details for you guys, just in case you want to connect afterwards. Thank you so much again,
Thank
Greg,
you.
first of all, for your patience as well with the system,
Oh,
but also for sharing your knowledge, your expertise on this topic with us. I'm sure that everybody who has watched and will be watching will take a lot out of it and will apply what they can to their own venues. So thank you
thank you.
again for what you do for our community.
Thank you very much. And I must emphasize that the connection problems were at my end. They were nothing to do with SpacetoCo. So I will get that.
No, it's okay. Thank you so much. I'll just pop you out of the screen. But if anybody else, if you guys would love to share your love to Greg and just thank you on the audience chat, you are more than welcome. Just to wrap up this session, I just wanted to share. Um, that, as I mentioned before, SpacetoCo, we are Oprah of the community venue space, we feel. We do create and provide free resources, ebooks, tools, checklists, guides, even fun community engagement stuff, as well as case studies, webinars, all of that jazz for you guys who do the hard work in our communities. And so we will also pop that into the follow-up email after this session. But just letting you know, please take advantage of the free resources that we've created. It spans from different topics, from how to apply for community grants to reactivating community spaces. And it also caters to all types of community venues, whether you are in council, whether you are a church, whether you're a sports facility, whether you are just like a simple rural church. We have all types of guides and resources for you. So thank you again, everybody, for the patience that you have for us today. Hopefully you can join us for next month's for next month's collab, which will be, I don't know the topic in particular, but we do have somebody coming in from GOAR Games who provide free community engagement and reactivating community venue games for community venues. And she's going to come in and talk about her experience and how we can revitalize our community venues in that way. So if that is something you're interested in, we'd love for you to tune in. But other than that, thank you so much. And we hope that you have a great day. And continue the great work that you guys do in our local communities. Goodbye.